Welcome to Travel Stories on the Milenomics Podcast Network with your hosts, Trevor Mountcastle and Tom Kim. This episode, we welcome Joe Cheung from As the Joe Flies and Disney Deciphered to talk family travel to the Asia Pacific, Australia and New Zealand trip. Joe, welcome to Travel Stories. It's just an incredible privilege to have you join us on the new podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be back in the saddle with you, Trevor. And good to see you again, TK.
Yep, welcome. Welcome to fellow Asian person who I guess also sat underneath the airline seats on my first Trans-Pacific flight. Did that in my childhood as well.
You know, it was funny we were talking about that. I did the same thing, but I only did it on Transcon. I didn't
Transcon?
Yeah, just to LA.
That's like nothing. You don't need to sleep for that.
It's too short.
Just weak-minded Americans, non-Asian Americans there with your little 5-hour flight having to sleep on the floor. Not like us.
5 hours,
the 14
5 hours, nothing.
14 hours.
Yeah, not even nonstop. Had to stop in Seattle.
I was just used to lay flats of any kind too early in life, I suppose.
Okay. Did they even exist?
Yeah, of course.
It was called the floor. It was called the floor.
Tough for him.
My dad used to fly the Concorde, and I don't think they had lay flats even on that.
No, they definitely didn't. Saw that at the Spirit of Flight Museum up in Seattle at Boeing Field, and man, that was like flying a regional jet. I mean, at least it was only like 2-3 hours, so it literally felt like a regional jet. You just got a whole lot farther. I assume that's how it felt. I mean, that's what the seats.
I did get upgraded to business as a kid, an operational upgrade. The second time I went to Korea, I think they oversold the flight, and the flight attendants were like, "Come with us," and I'm like, "Okay, where are we going?" And like, "Oh, we're going upstairs." And we went upstairs on a jumbo jet, and I was like, "Whoa!" I remember we ate cantaloupe wrapped in ham, and I thought it was very strange. It's like there's very strange food in business class.
Are you sure it wasn't prosciutto?
No, I'm sure it was prosciutto. I'm sure it was prosciutto,
but to you it was ham. To
12-year-old me, it was ham.
I like my kids. My kids are prosciutto fiends.
Are they?
Very, very costly. Honestly,
that's an expensive habit.
Man, that's worse than fresh fruit. That's what we're going through right now. Okay, so for I love this kind of comfortable entry to this podcast. Joe, it's great to have you back on.
It's called banter, Trevor.
Banter. That's what we call that.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So I suppose passing through the banter, you did 17 days in Auckland and Sydney and anywhere else in Australia?
So we started in Auckland and then went to Sydney. That was about 14 days, including flights and stuff like that. And then the last 3 days of the 17-day trip were actually in California at Disneyland. So pretty long trip overall. Probably the longest that I would want to go with my kids, at least in this stage in life.
That's incredible, though. That's awesome. So I don't want to rehash a lot of the stuff. Obviously, you talked on your trip on the Miles to Memory podcast as well. So I want to try to take a little bit of a different angle with that. But there are some things that I think still are worth kind of chatting about. One of those was your Air New Zealand experience. Could you tell us about why you chose to fly Air New Zealand and how you found the flights, how you paid for them, and kind of any unique experiences that folks might enjoy?
Yeah, I was looking for award space down to the South Pacific, and I'm a paid subscriber to our mutual friend Spencer's Award Alerts newsletter. And I could have used miles to go to Australia first and then come back from New Zealand. I think it was Qantas metal down to Australia and then actually United metal back from New Zealand. But because we were going down for the Women's World Cup and the main goal was to see the US women play, I made the tough decision. I agonized. Actually, I had all the flights. They were all booked. And I agonized over it for a while. And ultimately I decided, because the way it worked is if I'd done it that way, the US would have been in New Zealand while we were in Australia and vice versa. So we wouldn't have gotten to see them at all. And so because ultimately the trip was about seeing them, especially for my daughter and just as a family experience, I made the tough decision to like let go of the miles flights. And then because of that, I ended up having to pay cash. I did, again, via Spencer's award alerts, get Qantas Metal home, 3 seats in J, 2 seats in premium economy. That was from Australia, but I ended up having to pay cash to New Zealand. And so at that point, I was like debating between premium economy and just regular economy. And then I found out about Air New Zealand's Skycouches. I don't know if you guys, I don't know, Trevor, it is technically lie flat, but I think it's kind of beneath your level, beneath your comfort level.
It looks like a really cool concept, though.
You're tall, though.
Oh, no, I don't think it would work for me. I mean, well, okay, in all fairness, the first episode that we did of this podcast, TK and I both talked about our trip to Philippines, and we flew economy 5 hours. I know, it's pedestrian, only 5 hours. But we flew 5 hours down from Tokyo down to Manila, and we had ghetto lay flats, and we both somehow figured out how to fit on those economy seats. But you're right. The Skycouch, only 3 seats wide. It probably is a little bit short for somebody as myself with a 6'2" frame.
Well, even business class though on those Air New Zealand jets, don't they have the same seats they have at Virgin Atlantic? The ones you love so much.
I still have. I still have nightmares.
Are you still? You still have some post-traumatic stress?
There's definitely a little.
Virgin?
There's definitely still a little bit of PTSD from those Virgin seats. You're probably better off in a Skycouch. You probably had more room.
Yeah, you might at least have more storage because those seats are so tight, and there's no place for you to put your stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Air New Zealand. Food was great, cruise great. It's kind of just like Virgin, actually. Virgin's got the same problem. They've got great soft product, but the seats are kind of like weird. Except, I guess, if you're premium economy or economy, because they're doing all these innovative things for all their economy passengers.
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, like the decision came down to, I was thinking of booking premium economy, but that was going to be $2,500 per person one way.
Wow. Yeah, it's expensive.
I mean, what we ended up booking was not much better. It was about $1,500 per person one way. However, like I said, again, it was like going to be, I don't know if going to the South Pacific would be a once in a lifetime experience, but definitely seeing the World Cup in the South Pacific was going to be a once in a lifetime experience. And because I wasn't paying a lot for hotels in New Zealand, which we'll get to, and then my parents were covering our lodging in Sydney, I was like, you only live once. And so the Skycouch, for those of you who don't know, is you can pay extra and the seats have footrests that can come all the way up so that basically you have a couch and, it's touching the seat in front of you, essentially. It goes all the way across and it's about 5'1" wide. So you pay extra for, basically they give you like bedding and they also give you like exclusive use of the couch. And if you have to like get an extra seat in order to utilize the Skycouch, you're paying for that. So we ended up paying about $1,000 more total between the 5 of us, or maybe 800. I can't remember, but it wasn't a ton, especially when you're like already paying over $1,000 per ticket. We actually had 2 Skycouches plus 1 extra seat. So that was like 7 seats total. And all that was still cheaper than premium economy. And my thinking was, and it ended up working out, the age that my kids are at, like premium economy is better for us as adults because we can kind of recline and, reclining more makes us feel more comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. But for kids, and TK, I was thinking back to when we lay on the floor, this is just a fancier version. And for those of you guys who don't get that reference, I talked about on Miles to Memory is how I would lay on the floor in economy on long flights back to Asia. Well, this is the same exact thing, except for it's not the floor, it's actually the seat and it comes up into a bed. And with the price that you pay, you actually get bedding and stuff like that too. So it worked out really well.
Upholstered, right? And it's actually, you get a cushion as well.
Yeah,
you get
like a little mattress pad, and then you get a comforter and nicer pillows compared to the, those pillows that airlines usually have, and then like they get super staticky and all that. So, it's the nicer pillows that don't get like that. And yeah, I mean, we fit 2 kids across on one, my wife and another kid on the other. And, I was the one who suffered and just sat the whole time in the regular economy seat.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good deal. Like you essentially got 2 extra free seats. In terms of actual room on the plane, you might actually come out ahead.
And not only
Definitely.
that, if you're talking about what, $1,000, $1,500, you're talking about like what, $100 an hour for a much better experience, right?
Yeah, and that's for the whole family. So yeah, if you put it that way, I think yeah, because when people think about upgrading to business class, a lot of times you think about like how much you're paying per hour. There was no other frills. You don't get anything else. It's the same like economy food, same service and all that. But I think it worked really well because like I said, my kids are the perfect age for this and they wouldn't have appreciated premium economy anyway. Like you get quote unquote better food in premium economy. That doesn't really make a difference to a kid who's like 10 or 8 or 5, which is where my kids are.
Cantaloupe covered in ham, right?
Yeah, well, actually, my kids would have appreciated that, but yeah, it's not. The premium economy food isn't that fancy these days compared to what you got. Plus, you were on an Asian airline for that upgrade.
Well, no, I was on Northwest at that time. By the
Oh,
way,
okay.
so but it
I
was
thought you
okay.
had
I
said
mean,
Korean Air, but still, yeah.
no, that not that time. But I'm curious, Joe, you're a travel agent. I was just curious, were you able to leverage anything, being that, I imagine travel agents have, I guess, a whole nother set of hacks or a whole nother set of things that you can leverage sometimes for your personal trips?
Yeah, I was not able to leverage anything. I typically don't deal in flights. What I found
Makes
is
sense.
so when you book hotels as a travel agent, typically, like for Hyatt, for example, the if I were to book a cash rate for you, TK, you would just be paying the same as you would pay if you booked it online yourself. Like the rate that you see online is the same as what I book for you, and then Hyatt just cuts like a small percentage of that to me as the travel agent. Flights is different. What travel agent fees are not baked into flight prices already, and so I've booked flights for most notably for like school groups, but that is like a big group and I have to actually add my own commission to what the price that they get quoted. So the only reason why I do it for school groups is, well, one, it's for a school that needed my help, and then two, it's because like it is when you're talking about a big group like of 25
Yeah, it's got to be a
students,
lot more complicated.
it's complicated. It is a pain. So like I actually can like do something. But like if you were booking a cash flight, like I'm not doing anything to help you really. So why charge you an extra like 25 to $50 to book it through me? So for most clients, like especially, most of my business is down to Disney World and stuff like that. They ask if I book flights and I'm like, I can, but it's going to cost you more. Or you can just pick my brain and I'll be like, book this flight and you can just, book it on your own. And then that also makes my life easier if there are like cancellations and stuff like that, then I don't got to deal with it.
Yeah, I wonder, it seemed to make sense for normal flights. I wonder if there's any kind of margin left in like premium flights for the business class and things like that. It feels like there might still be something out there, but I guess maybe it's not so much the case. It seems like it was maybe where there was still something left over just because the margins are so big, right, on like a business class or first class ticket.
Yeah. And, the other thing that you make me think of and that I get really curious about is there's obviously a whole side of travel agenting that I'm not involved with, but that works with, getting visas for people going to China or like,
Right.
for our families or at least friends are like my parents are pretty savvy. They can book their own travel, but their friends, like when they're going back home or when they're like for various reasons, we're of the age where our family needs to go back for unfortunately family tragedies and things like that, and so there's definitely a huge market. I have a friend who is my age, but like whenever she goes back to Taiwan, like she always checks with a travel agent first in terms of ticket pricing and things like that. So there is this whole like market for I don't know if it's like foreign nationals. It's a lot with Asia.
Well, I was about to say, I feel like the marketing for Asian flights is so different. They're much more accustomed to using an agent, than using Expedia or using, Travelocity or whatever. They're used to getting like kind of higher level service, maybe for higher price, but in some cases, those guys have access to probably some kind of deal, whether it is because they're ticketing it in, not in the US and maybe somewhere else, or, maybe they just have a certain marketing budget like Korean Air or somebody will go to them and be like, hey, we got a block of tickets here for you. If you can sell all these, we'll make you a deal.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, we had Michael Traeger on from TravelSork, and he talked about kind of finding those, open jaw tickets and stuff that perhaps a normal person might not initially think of or might not be able to figure out the most efficient way. And sometimes you can kind of find a more premium approach that might actually result in savings to kind of cover up or bridge the gap on any booking fee. So Joe, you made it to New Zealand. You did a couple of things that I was really curious about in New Zealand, in Auckland. I think you said that you stayed at the Park Hyatt, but it wasn't just a standard points booking, right? You used the family rate, which I think we've probably talked about in the past on the show, but we've never actually done it ourselves. How did that go? Was there anything like, did you have to use a Hyatt concierge, or what was the process for pulling that all together?
Yeah, it had been one of those things that I talked about like a million times, but never got to try myself. So was super excited to do it. And that property in particular is very well set up for it. So I guess technicalities behind the family rate are if you book a room under a regular rate, and that includes award night rates, you can book a second room at what they call the family rate. And that room will be guaranteed to be connecting. And it's designed for like bigger families like mine with 3 kids. Because I think the max occupancy of any room it might have been 3, or definitely wasn't above 4. And I'm a family of 5. And so, instead of having to book a suite, you can book this family rate room. And that second room is half off, has to be in cash, but is half off. So, what I did was the Park Hyatt Auckland is very inexpensive as far as Park Hyatts go. Even during like a very busy time, Mia Hamm was staying there as well. It's one of the nicest hotels. We saw her at breakfast, small flex there, but it was one of the nicest hotels that, they have in Auckland, but it was only 15,000 points per night, unlike the, Park Hyatt New York is like 30,000, right? And this is
Park Hyatt Sydney to be in that
right.
part of
Yes.
the world, right?
Yeah, we were looking at that too. Yeah, is it 30,000? It was 25 or 30,000 because we were looking at just maybe staying there for a night just to, go all Trevor on it. But we didn't do that, by the way, spoiler alert. So 15,000 a night, and then the cash rate ended up being, it was definitely less. I kind of forgot because of the conversion rate, but it was definitely less than $400 a night. It could have been maybe $250 or $300 US per night. So we were paying 15,000 points plus a couple $100 US per night. And as I was saying, the Park Hyatt Auckland is very well set up for it. TK, this may resonate with you more, but I just remember like growing up in Hong Kong, there were a lot of rooms or like apartment complexes where you get out of the elevator and there's doors on both sides. But like if a family owns both doors, like, essentially that whole entire floor is like there. So it's like one kind of gigantic joint apartment. And the Park Hyatt Auckland was set up like that. There are doors that like, because like I first got into the room and I was like, I thought this family rate was supposed to be a connecting room. Like, what's up with this? Like, but the other room that we had is across the hallway, quote unquote. But then I realized that there are bigger doors that close off the hallway and turn us into a little like Asian two family apartment. At least, what I remember from living there 30 years ago or whatever. And so it was awesome because we could close it off, open up the 2 doors between the rooms, and the kids could run back and forth between the different rooms. And, we had 2 bathrooms, 2 balconies, and everything worked out great. So like that was even more fun for them than just because we had that hallway. And then, again, because we're Asian, that hallway is perfect to leave all our shoes in. Right.
Yeah,
whereas if you have the 2 rooms with the connecting, then like where you put, it's always
where are my shoes?
Yeah, where do you put your shoes? You put them in the closet. You don't know where they are, but like we left them all in that little foyer area, and being able to close that off was awesome. And then, of course, the kids had a lot of fun because there was like doorbells on like the 3 doorbells, right? One on the outside of the double doors, and then one for each room inside. So that was a lot of fun.
It sounds like a great stay and a great deal because it occurs to me like the Park Hyatt probably could have charged like a lot. It's Women's World Cup, it's a peak time. And, Auckland, at least, and it's been a couple years since I've been there. I have been there a couple years ago. And I remember the number of points hotel options are just not very many. So really, when you look at the international brands that are there, you think they could charge quite a bit of a premium. And I almost feel like in Australia, that's what they're doing. Like the Park Hyatt is insane. It's much more expensive than the other luxury hotels around there.
Yeah. And I was surprised because it was very clear to me that a lot of FIFA execs were staying there. There was like a little lounge area that was closed off to the public, but there was like drinks and there was TVs, and obviously you could go in there to like, there was soft drinks like on a table, but then also it looked like you could go there and get a drink, but it looked like it was like only for official FIFA people. And in fact, they had like a cocktail party in one of the common areas that was obviously like a bunch of like FIFA. I don't know if they were big wigs, but like at least medium wigs. And like I said, I think most of the 99ers, which is the team that won the World Cup in 1999, because I saw Mia Hamm, Christine Lilly, Julie Foudy, who does a lot of TV stuff. She was doing a Zoom interview on CNN. And my wife was like, "Oh, that's our couch. Like it's the same furniture. So she must be in the Park Hyatt too." And so there was a lot of people at the Park Hyatt, but still, I booked it pretty early on. Oh, and then to answer your question from like a million years ago, Trevor, I did have my concierge do it, but my understanding is that you can call the hotel, and any hotel that has a family rate, like they know how to do it, and they know how to do whatever happens on the back end.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to research that. Is there like a rate code or something you can do to look it up online? Or
my understanding is like the only way you can do it is to call, which is why I asked my concierge to do it, just so I didn't have to call. But I've actually called it in as well. I can't remember. It may have been the Globus line, but when you call in the Globalist line, they have the same access to rates as a regular agent would have. And so I remember like one time I asked, I can't remember what hotel, but it might have been like a Hyatt Place, and they were like, "Oh, they don't have a family rate for that one." So it's usually like the bigger hotels, like I think Hyatt Regencies, Park Hyatts, if you're lucky, like we were. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really good to get that extra room. But the Park Hyatt was definitely like the fanciest and nicest stay.
Well, and it sounds like you were in the right place, especially for the Women's World Cup. So, how did you get the tickets? Was that like a lottery? I know that for the Men's World Cup, it's a lot harder to get.
No. Yeah, it was super easy. Most of the games I went to ended up selling out, but I got them pretty early. And that was the other thing, when I was saying like, oh, we were deciding whether to go to Australia first or to New Zealand. I will say that Women's World Cup tickets, face value, were like $30. And so that was going to be, I would have eaten them if we decided to go in the opposite order and not go to the games. Men's World Cup tickets in Brazil, when I went in 2014, face value was already $175 to start. And that was in 2014. And, it's 2023 now. So that would have been much harder to stomach. And with the men's, it was like a crazy lottery and stuff like that. But with the women's, it was fairly easy to get. Now, when we were actually on site and when the US didn't do as well as they were supposed to do. So like people are like trying to trade tickets and like go to different games than the ones they had booked. Like we had a game booked in Sydney that the US should have played in if they had played to form. But since they didn't, they went to Melbourne instead. But at that point, they were tough to get on the resale market, even though they still weren't that expensive. It is whatever. So I bought tickets to 3 games. It was pretty straightforward. And the other nice thing...
What city was that again? I didn't quite hear. What city was that?
Trevor taught me it's pronounced Melbourne. So, I just say it.
Hey, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. So,
hey, I learned from the best.
You didn't want to change vectors and head to Melbourne.
No. Yes, that's the. I mean, it was just too much last minute. Plus, my parents were there, and the other nice thing, and I heard that the Euros that are going to be in Germany, the men's European Championship tournament in Germany next year in 2024, has done the same thing. Public transportation was included in the cost of the ticket. So,
great idea.
The Euro tickets, of course, are going to be way more, but like for $30, we got a subway ride to the game. It all worked out really well.
So in other words, they're forcing Americans coming in to take mass transit, which they're normally unaccustomed to do.
Well, there was no really other convenient way to get there, but yes, Trevor, they were forcing us into their socialist ways.
So any thoughts, any final thoughts on World Cup before we move on to other things in New Zealand?
I would just say that, it was a great atmosphere, great experience. The game I referenced the most is not the US game that I saw, but the Philippines game. I think the really cool thing about the World Cup, men's or women's, and especially this men's one, that it's going to be in the US in 2026, which I am not ready for. If you look at how much Messi tickets are going for, it's going to be insane in 2026 for the tickets. But if you can get to a game of a team that like either hasn't been to the World Cup before or like is not going to, hasn't been that successful in 2026, there's going to be more of those teams because the field for men has expanded to 48. Likewise, this year in 2023, the women's field expanded from 24 to 32. So we got a lot of newer teams. That Philippines game was like, that stadium was rocking. They lost 4 or 5-0, but it was like one of the loudest stadiums I've ever been in because people were just so happy and excited that the Philippines were just even there. And like, that's kind of what world sport is all about.
It's almost like a Cinderella moment for these newcomers. It sounds like,
and they won a game too. I mean, I can't imagine what the stadium was like the game that they won. So, they actually no, never mind. I can't imagine because they beat New Zealand, so it was pretty sad.
Oh my!
Because they were in New Zealand. But I think
if that was in some countries, like the stadium might not actually be still standing.
Yeah. So, but I will also say that like the Women's World Cup is it's so much. There's a different energy at the Men's World Cup, and I would say that not all of it is positive. Obviously, there's a lot more like rabid fans, but the story I keep coming back to is there was like no line at the bar, and like there was just much
fewer
less
hooligans.
Yes, exactly.
And that doesn't even sound like a New Zealand thing. I mean, if it was in Australia, there'd definitely be a line at the bar, though.
No, there was no line at any of the bars because people like, especially because the tickets are cheaper. Like people take their kids, they take their families. It was just a lot more positive and happy atmosphere. Whereas, of course, the only World Cup I went to was in Brazil. But like in Brazil, it was pretty. I mean, even the friends that I was with were pretty crazy. So that's I've been to 2 women's World Cups and 1 men's, and that's my limited data points on that.
So let's move to the non-World Cup stuff. You drove, which is something that I haven't done in New Zealand. I've done it in Australia. But what was your experience there? Logistics wise, and just I'm trying to remember. Does New Zealand drive on the? I don't want to say the wrong side of the road.
Opposite side. Yes,
the opposite side. There we go.
Yes. We rented a car for a day. I rented a van because my parents were there. They were actually staying at a different resort that they paid for on cash. That was like just like 2 blocks away from us. And so we rented a car. Yeah, driving on the left side was not bad at all. I have done it in Ireland, which was a lot more stressful. Like getting off a red eye, even though I had flown into Shannon, which was like kind of in the middle of nowhere. Less stressful getting out of a city. I mean, less stressful getting out of Shannon than getting out of a city, but still, like getting off a red eye, very little sleep. And then in Ireland, the roads at points are like very tight, and like the hedges on the sides of the roads are like whipping past your side view mirrors. That was way more stressful because the road was tight. In New Zealand, it was mostly highway, and then either that or like there was like, and then once you get far enough out, there's like no one around. And so it was a lot less stressful. Plus my jet lag had been worn out. We only rented a car for 1 day, and that was towards the end of the trip.
And as far as logistics wise, did you have to go back to the airport? Did the hotel have it? I know that in Melbourne, the Grand Hyatt had a Avis right in the basement, which was really convenient.
Yeah, that would have been nice. No, there was a Hertz that was maybe 5-6 block away. It was about a 15-minute walk away. So I walked there, picked it up, drove the car back to the Park Hyatt, picked my family up. Then we did what we did. We went to Muriwai Beach, which was pretty cool. Saw a couple other things I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to look back at the pictures, and then dropped my family back off at the Park Hyatt, then dropped the car off. That was all done in a day. We picked the car up at like 8:30, and we were done by like 4:30, and that worked well.
Hey, and you didn't end up in jail. I don't know if they do that in Australia, in New Zealand, like they do it in the U.S. with Hertz.
Wasn't that? I mean, there might Avis, or is that Hertz?
No, it's Hertz. It's
Hertz.
I
heard Hertz.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No, yeah, there might be a warrant out for my arrest in New Zealand, so I just have to check into that before the next time I go there. So,
I think you also did a tour, right, while you were there?
Yes, so we did the Hobbiton and Waitomo Caves glowworm tour, and really, I was very excited to go to Hobbiton. Lifelong dream to go see Lord of the Rings stuff. We took a tour. The bus picked us up at like 5:30 a.m. I think if I had to do it again, I probably would have rented the car for 2 days and done it on my own pace. I was a little too chicken to do that before, but I think I would have preferred that. Anyway, it was, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, it was as awesome as you can imagine it being. Had a beer in the Green Dragon, got to take a lot of pictures. Really loved that. My kids were fairly patient with that portion. And then we went to Waitomo, where there are these glowworms, which they call them worms, but they're actually maggots, but they're bioluminescent magnets maggots in a cave. It would be cool if there were magnets too. And so, you get to see the glowing worms, and then you take there's like a river running underneath the cave, which is partially why the worms live there. You take this boat where they they have like ropes above where they're just pulling you along, and it's all really dark, and then worms are above you, and it looks like the night sky, except for they're glowworms. So it's pretty awesome, and my kids love that.
Why were you cautious on not driving yourself? Was it the distance, or just, I don't know where Hobbiton is, if it's like mountains or anything like that?
Yeah, it was a lot the distance. It was about a 2 to 2.5 hour drive, and it was going to be both ways. And I should say that we didn't really decide. We had designs on renting a car for a day, but we didn't we didn't commit to it until we were actually in New Zealand. Whereas I figured with like the Hobbiton and Glowworm tour, like it's similar to why I was willing to pay all that money to fly down. I was like, I'm not missing this. And so now I know, I could have showed up at any time and maybe had to wait an hour, but gotten on any tour. But I was like, I want to make sure I get there. I don't want to miss it because I'm not able to rent a car or some silly reason. I'm just going to pay for someone to drive us there, take a small group tour. And so, that's kind of how that went. But if I were to go back, now I know that I could drive down there, especially it's a long drive. So I wouldn't have wanted to do it the first day that I got to New Zealand or something like that. But if you're in New Zealand for a longer trip, ideally, actually, you just pass by that as you're making your way south, to the South Island, which we didn't get to see at all. So that's how I would do it next time.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky. I was able to go to Hobbiton as well a couple of years ago. And actually at that time, I think it was harder to get a ticket. You did need to kind of reserve it a little bit more in advance. But I was lucky. My friend drove because, I cannot handle opposite hand driving. It just, my brain will just collapse and explode.
Yeah, I think that living in Hong Kong in middle school helped because I kind of knew, it was a formative enough time in my life. I was only there for 2.5 years, but it was formative enough that my brain, something had registered in my brain at that time. And so that really helps.
Yeah, I think I've only driven on the other side of the road, probably 2 or 3 countries, but I've done so much in Australia that as long as I can get past the first, I don't know, 2-3 hours, first couple dozen turns, I'm generally pretty good. Having driven, all the way out to 12 Apostles out of Melbourne, and then driving all the way the other way to Canberra, and then up to Sydney in some cases through the mountains or hills. I don't know if you call them mountains.
I got about 20 feet in the parking lot, and I was like, "This is not for me."
You got that far? That sounds.
I got about 20 feet in
the parking lot. Just goes one way.
Nope. Wasn't working. It was not for me.
See, that sounds like me.
You gotta know your limits.
Exactly. Better the parking lot than actually on a road.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We had that challenge on our honeymoon. In Bermuda, they ride scooters, motorbikes and scooters. So I tried doing that on the hotel grounds. And I said, you know what? I just got married. I'm not going to risk my my wife's life because I'm just not comfortable on a scooter. So, knowing your limits is definitely important. So did you make it to any other roadside attractions along your way?
I think those are the main things in New Zealand. We really, unlike before we had kids where we tried to pack things in, we really have become a plan for one thing per day type family. And that includes if there's a game, that's kind of the one thing. We did some Auckland attractions. None of them were really, Hobbiton was definitely the highlight. I think if I was in New Zealand for not the World Cup, I would have planned it very differently, taken more day trips, gone down to the South Island, gone to Wellington, gone to other places. But, we were there for the World Cup, and, we saw 2 games in our 5 days there. So that was the main thing. And then hopped on over to Sydney, which you think that they're so close, but it's a 4-hour flight, long enough that Trevor won't sit in economy flight to get to Australia. And so, I had some relatives there too. So, that's why, we would have stayed in New Zealand the whole time. But because I was so close, quote unquote, we went on over to go see my relatives in Sydney.
Funny that you say that. I think I did fly economy round trip. Actually, we had business class, but it was not a very comfortable business class from Auckland to Perth. But from Sydney to Auckland, it was economy, and
Good
it
for
was a
you, man.
long flight.
Good for
It
you.
literally felt like a transcon almost, like a short transcon.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, Trevor. You really did it. For those of you,
Man, what a tough crowd this is.
For those of you who didn't listen to the Save Rossi observation deck, this is old hat for us. Me making fun of Trevor and his fancy ways.
It's okay. I've been trying to hold the torch there. Keep him honest. The struggle's real, right? Right, Trevor?
Yes.
Oh, you got to keep me humble.
Yeah,
indeed.
Economy's good for the soul sometimes.
Yes. Note, I say humbled, not grounded.
Well, I will tell you, Trevor, like, I think the really interesting thing is, and I was thinking about this, like, I did not care when I was a kid about sleeping on the floor and that 15-hour flight. it was just an experience. So really, with the kids, like, if you want to take your daughter somewhere, and especially if you have a Park Hyatt waiting for her at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, and you have to slum it in premium economy or something like that, it's really not going to make a difference to her. And in fact, the opposite, like a lie flat seat, not that I can find 5 lie flat seats these days, but we put our 5-year-old in a lie flat seat, and really, aside from her getting to sleep a little bit more, like they don't appreciate business class the way, and now I'm like, we'll wait till they're teenagers again to, like, really, I mean, I'll try to get business class when I can. And I did, but I think that's when
I think Trevor hears you, but he's not listening.
No, I hear you.
But you got to try. You got to
totally,
try. You got to try.
No,
you got to lead them to water.
I totally hear you.
To water.
I totally hear you, but I'm not flying. I'm not flying business class for her. I'm flying it for me. I'm flying it for my wife. If she happens to have a seat because we're able to get 3 seats, she's going to have her own seat for our next trip, and I don't even really expect her to use the seat because she's still. I mean, I don't know why 2-year-olds need to have their own seat. I mean, they just don't. Like, they're not going to use it anyway. But really, we're doing it for ourselves more than we're doing it for her. We're doing the trip. Well, okay, fine. At this age, we're doing the trip for ourselves too, but we're happy to be able to bring her along, expose her to things. If she gets like 1 or 2 things from these trips, that's a win. But it's probably going to be for a long time that I'm going to be trying to just, fly in the premium cabins, because I personally don't want to be back there. I don't say this. I don't believe I'll ever be in your situation where you're trying to find 5 seats. Like, I can't even fathom how you're trying to find 5 seats and how you actually succeed with it.
It's a challenge.
Looking for 3 and 4 is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's why when we flew back on Qantas, it was 3 in business and 2 in premium economy, premium economy was totally nice. My son, who I gave him the option, by the way, I was like, your youngest sister she's young enough that she's really not going to get it. Not that he totally got it, but I was like, you can either sit back in premium economy with me, like our seats are not going to turn into beds. But, other than that, it should still be pretty nice. And I was like, you can either sit with dad or, I'll make your little sister come with me, and then you can stay with mom and have the lie flat. And so he opted to come with me. But when we were getting off, he's like, Dad, do you think I can try business class sometime? And I was like, sure, bud. Next time. Although I flew everyone home from LA on Mint, so he did. So I was like, don't worry, man, I got you.
That's great. That's great.
Cool. That's great.
That's awesome.
Were you able to get the window seats on the 380 up there in premium economy?
Yes. So we had a window seat. It was really nice. And actually, the really nice thing, I know we skipped Sydney. We can go back to that. But like, the really nice thing about being on the A380, number one, it was like, my son, of course, like many stereotypical males, is into all forms of transportation. So getting into the A380 in the first place was like huge for his life, huge milestone for him, which was awesome. Then we got to be on the second floor, which was even better. Hey, you guys have more A380 experience. It looked like they closed off the stairs. It seemed like, they're preventing people from going up and down, unlike 747s that I remember from my childhood.
Well, even then, there weren't a ton of people going up and down on those 747s that I remember.
I didn't really feel like they were really dissuading people. I think it was a safety thing on the It's kind of like that thing that they have for getting into
the
club.
velvet rope or whatever.
Yeah, the velvet rope. That's it. That's what
Yeah,
what I recall them doing on the A380.
Yeah, it was like a glass. No, it was like maybe it was.
Might have been like
yeah.
a gate, right? It's an actual.
Yeah,
like,
it was like kind of like a clear. I don't know if it was plastic or glass because I didn't go touch it, but it was a gate. But what I was going to say is it worked out perfectly because the business class and premium economy cabins are on the upper deck, whereas first class is in the nose. And so while I would have loved to put them up in first class, this way we were all together. And so I actually seated them towards the rear of the business cabin, and I seated us towards the front of the premium economy cabin. And so we went back and forth, and we're able to say hello. No one gave us I was like, oh, if I hadn't seen my wife for a while, I was like, I'm going to go up to business class. I hope nobody,
stops you,
shakes their finger at me for going. But yeah, it was totally fine going back and forth. And, I had good bonding time with my son as we slummed it in premium economy.
Premium economy.
It's still premium. Yes. So was that the new seat, or was that the old sort of almost angled lay flattish, kind of like the cutter business seat?
I think it was new cabins in general. It was nicely appointed. It was pretty comfortable reclining. I was able to, I got like a few hours, I got maybe 5 or 6 hours of sleep on the economy seat on the way down to Auckland. So the premium economy seat was like, it was a huge upgrade. It was like I was on the Concorde. And so,
well, then you'd get there really fast.
I wish, man, my son would like that whole concept would blow his mind. So maybe, I know they've talked about bringing back supersonic flight, so we'll see. But yeah, the sea was really nice. The one thing I was like making sure, I was like, you must, and Trevor, you'll appreciate this, like episode 1 of Observation Deck. I was like, you must get me a set of pajamas. And so my wife did manage to get me a set of pajamas. We got 3 sets actually. I had a friend who got me a set from Eva Air years ago, who lives around here, and so I returned the favor and gave him a set of Qantas pajamas because we got one for the 5-year-old and the 10-year-old, but they couldn't fit them. Even the smallest size they couldn't fit. But we got 3 sets of pajamas so that was good enough for me. I got to hang out with my son, and that was fine. And honestly, I felt really lucky. Getting 3J and 2 premium economy all on the same flight. I mean, that's as
winning.
Far as, that
that's
really
a huge
is winning. Win. So yeah, so I was very happy with our flight home.
That's definitely a huge win. So take us back to Sydney.
Like I said, my dad decided to cover our stay there. We stayed at the Meriton World Suites. There's Meriton must be some big either real estate or some kind of company there because their name is on everything. And so it's building that it's like half hotel, half apartments, and so we were in the hotel half, of course, and it was a 3-bedroom suite, but it was essentially an apartment. Like we had a kitchen and all that, and then we were pretty close to Chinatown, so it was awesome. We were essentially, I was saying it felt so much like Asia because you go down the elevator, you walk out, there's Asian restaurants everywhere. You're in essentially a mall, and there's in fact, there was the basement, and there was both a regular Western and a Chinese grocery store down there. So, like I said, we had the kitchen so we could get stuff for breakfast and things like that.
I was looking at that same area for my upcoming trip to Sydney. I had actually found a Choice Hotels redemption there. Some weird company called APX. I don't even know what that is, but they have exactly the same setup. They're basically hotels, in a kind of an extended stay hotel inside an apartment building. But it was interesting because, the thing with Choice Hotels is, they have these redemptions where, it's the same price, whether it's 2-bedroom suite, 1-bedroom suite, 1-bedroom room. It's kind of funny. There's a lot of a lot of the hotels that really aren't used to having any redemptions. I think they have the setup where basically it's one price, even if it's the 2-bedroom suite. And that's what I booked. But then I ended up changing it because I didn't actually need that space. I thought I was going to be needing the space because I had some friends I'm traveling with, but I think our travel plans diverged, so I ended up staying somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I felt so I obviously went to Sydney Harbor and I saw where the Park Hyatt was, and then I also went to Darling Harbor and saw where the Hyatt Regency was, and ultimately I was like, if my dad hadn't said he was going to stay there, and by the way, it was $600 US per night for the 7 of us to stay there. Technically, we were only supposed to have 6, so we snuck a person in, but whatever.
It's a
But
rounding error at
still,
that point.
yeah, rounding error. And I was thinking about it, and it would have been nice to be at Darling Harbor, but in terms of like the food options, especially, our kids, when they're traveling, like the most kind of the safest bet for a square meal that will be mostly healthy is Asian food for my particular kids. And, there was a Din Tai Fung like at the, just in our
I
same
saw that.
complex, which
Yep,
was awesome. And like at Darling Harbor, definitely at the Park Hyatt, there would have been like no food options. It's all like kind of like the fancy restaurants, like by the Opera House and stuff like that.
You
Yeah, I
had
have to
me.
agree. Like that Circular Quay Rocks area and Darling Harbor, they have expensive options, but yeah, the area where you're staying looked like so much more flexible, so many more options. Like at least from a food perspective, a lot happier. I think staying somewhere there than maybe some of those other more popular touristy places.
I was sold at Din Tai Fung personally.
Yeah, I mean, we hit like almost all the major Asian food groups. I think we had Vietnamese food one day. We obviously had Chinese food with Din Tai Fung. We went to a conveyor belt sushi, which my kids love. Like we do that here sometimes, but the conveyor belt sushi here, we only go for the fun of the conveyor belt. Like the sushi's not good. That was awesome. We went there twice. We went to a Korean place. We went to ramen place. So we were not wanting for food at all the whole time. Oh, like stuff like Japanese soft serve, bubble tea, like all that stuff. So, we were just eating that up all day. So that worked out really well. And then of course, we had a big Chinese meal with my relatives in actual Chinatown, which was like a few blocks away. So overall, ate really well in Sydney. And I think kind of the best Asian food we've had that's not in Asia.
Yeah, Sydney's kind of funny that way. I feel like Sydney has really good Asian food and questionable Western food sometimes. Like I've had some Western food in Sydney. I thought this is not really that great, except for seafood. Seafood's really good there, but everything else, I'm like, this is not amazing.
Yeah, and I forgot like how much like when you're eating Western food over there, it's like fish and chips for everything. It's like fish and chips all over the place. And eventually, so we had a ton of that in Auckland. I mean, we had some Asian food in Auckland as well. Actually, like on our way down on Air New Zealand, there was a show kind of about the Chinese diaspora and various Chinese restaurants that were spread throughout, or Asian. No, it was Chinese, spread throughout New Zealand. So because of that, we tried to find a couple of Asian restaurants in New Zealand. But like overall, it was a lot of fish and chips, and so that's why it was really refreshing in Australia to get a lot of Asian food.
So I have to realize that a lot of Sydney was seeing family. Did you guys get to Taronga Zoo?
Yeah, we did. It was really awesome. Like we went to the zoo in Auckland as well. I don't want to speak too illy of the zoos in Boston, but they're just not great. There's 2 here. But just even the design, it just felt like so much more. I don't know how to explain it, but like, I know enough. It's like the theme park background that I have. Like, I know like how you can feel when things are designed in a way that it kind of like invites the guests in better. And that's how both the Taronga Zoo in Sydney and the zoo in Auckland felt. It just felt like much better design. And of course, there are like animals that we don't get to see regularly in the States, but still, like even beyond that, it just felt very well designed and we really enjoyed our time. And then the thing that my kids really loved is we ended up, they have this ropes course, which is not part of the zoo. It's like a separate thing, but you can pay to do this ropes course and you're like doing it like above the zoo. And so we all did that. My daughter did the whole thing. My son only did part of it, but we really enjoyed, she was like up. She loves like rope courses and climbing and stuff like that. But then like doing that and like looking down and seeing the animals and stuff like that was like super cool. Again, not going to be done with miles and points, but if you want to splurge, there was like a reserve hotel to stay at like inside the zoo. Like I was very curious as to what that experience would be like. It was like a lodge like inside the zoo or whatever. So it's like, oh yeah, I mean, I can see fancy people staying there. So, Trevor, all the money you save using points for all the other stuff, spend 2 nights in Taronga Zoo or something like that and see how that goes.
Yeah, I remember going there, and it's just such a scenic zoo. Like I remember taking a photo of like these giraffes, and then skyscrapers, behind them, and just thinking like, wow, these animals have like the best view of probably any zoo in the world.
Yeah, like you're like walking downhill the whole way, and about halfway down is I think where the best view is, and you just see all of Sydney like across the harbor, and it
Exactly.
really is like an amazing view, like you said, TK. I realize this is a audio medium, but just imagine an amazing view of the Sydney skyline and some animals bleeding nearby you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're about the gram, I mean, this is a good place.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
I also paid extra, I think, when I went there a couple years ago to do the koala experience, and I would actually recommend against that because it's kind of pretty weak compared to like other places. Like if you go to like Brisbane and some of the koala sanctuaries and things like that, it's so much better elsewhere than in Sydney.
What made it
Just
weak?
FYI. You don't even get to like get close to it. It's like you get a koala encounter, you get to be in the vicinity of a koala. You don't even get to like, it doesn't get to touch. You don't get to hug it. There's like no contact whatsoever. And that's probably a good thing from a wildlife perspective, but for the amount that they're charging to be koala adjacent wasn't really that cool to me.
In Brisbane, you get to like pet them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're gonna let me pet a koala, I'm not gonna say no. So, I'm
an evil person. I want to touch the animal. I'm sorry.
They're so cute.
They are. They're incredible. But yeah, just again for our listeners who are doing their Australia planning, just be aware. Not all koala encounters are created equal. Do your research.
Yeah, not to circle back to Melbourne, which is not a big focus of this episode, but just outside in Yarra Valley, they've got the Healesville Sanctuary. I didn't do the koala experience, but I'm pretty sure they got to pet the koalas. You can also feed kangaroos and see the Tasmanian devils and such. You laugh at Tasmanian devils. Have you guys seen Tasmanian devils?
I might have seen one at the zoo, but I can't remember what it looks like.
Yeah, so they look like little. I want to say they're cuter
furballs.
Rats. They're like somewhere between a furball and a rat, and they look super cute until they show their teeth. And so I'm standing over a little habitat area, and one kind of gets in the way of another, and the teeth come out, and I mean I almost jump back because it was like, whoa, okay, these things look cute until they take their teeth, and the teeth are like like an inch or two on a really small animal. I mean, they look fearsome. I mean, we're not talking about Looney Tunes fear level, but those teeth are pretty substantial.
It's the reason why they're called devils, right? Is what you're telling me.
Exactly. I've never seen them spin though.
Yeah, that's probably a Warner Brothers thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So, any final thoughts on Sydney?
Yeah, we went to Scenic World, which is basically there's a rock formation called the Three Sisters, which is really awesome. And then they built like a cable car and like other means of transport to get different
Blue
views
Mountains,
of it.
right? The Blue Mountains, right?
Yeah. Yes. And it was really amazing. And like that was probably that and just the concept of New Zealand. Like I guess New Zealand, because we were mainly there for the games, it was easier to give up the idea of like going on like big, long, expansive hikes. But really in the Blue Mountains, like that's where I was like, oh, I wish these kids were a few years earlier. Excuse me. Well, if they were born a few years earlier, then they would be a few years older. And then we could have gone on some extensive like 4 or 5 hour hikes because the Blue Mountains, like the views were just amazing. I mean, we spent the whole day there and yeah, I get that it's very much just capitalizing on the view by building like I think it's a cable car, there's a tram, and then there's like a very steep, it's not like a roller coaster, but it's like one of those steep trains that like you feel like you're falling.
Funicular.
No. Oh yeah, no. One of them is that, but then they have this train, it's like it's almost feels like a mine car, but it's basically like you're facing straight down.
Oh, okay. Intentionally thrilling.
Yes. And so they have like 3 different forms of transportation to get to different views. But like that is private land, but there are like gates where you can just exit into the public land and there's just like vast and extensive hikes that go to, there was like a ruined tower that, it almost looked like it wasn't New Zealand, but it's like Lord of the Rings. Like this is like an old watchtower that was destroyed and like you can like take a 4 or 5 hour hike out there. So would have really loved to do that. Didn't get the chance to. but just have to go back. But the Blue Mountains were really amazing. And I have to say that it was winter down there, but it was like 60s, 70s. So honestly, the weather was like perfect.
I like the winter in the southern hemisphere. I think people make a big deal out of it, but I'm like, this is fine. 60s and 70s. I mean, I'm not complaining.
Yeah, aside from the sun going down at like 6 p.m., like you have less daylight. That's the bummer. But in terms of like the actual weather, like perfect.
Yeah, I think we've been down a couple of times for Vivid, which is in June timeframe, and it's always been very comfortable. So circling back to Blue Mountains, is that what, an hour or two out of the city?
Yeah, I think it was an hour and a half drive. Australia is like very big on the speed trap camera, so we basically stayed at the speed limit, and so I think it was about an hour and a half. And yeah, we rented a car again for a day, and by then I was used to it, and so that drive was pretty solid. And
You can actually take public transit there. The light rail, or not the light rail, the like commuter rail, I think goes all the way out to the Blue Mountains. That's what I took.
yes, it definitely does. It's just like
It's slower though. It'll take more
yeah,
than
and
an hour.
it's
and a half.
better to like be in control of your own destiny type of
Yes.
thing, especially when you have kids in tow.
I did not have kids in tow, so yes.
I'm always in favor of control, but that's just personal a personal fallacy. So Joe, after all the experience you've had driving in Auckland and Sydney, would you do like a longer trip, like drive up the Gold Coast or down to Canberra or Melbourne?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, driving on the other side of the road, like it's really toughest in the cities. And so I think once you get out and you're going like from place to place, I think it would be a lovely thing to do. And I would really enjoy it. Like the same way I would enjoy driving across this country. I think it would be amazing to drive up and down the coast in Australia.
I did that. It was great because somebody else was driving.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yes. Get your friends to do the driving.
It's all a balance. So one of these days when you travel with us to one of the other side roads, I'll be happy to do all the driving since you do so much of it in the U.S. So I thought, or I suppose TK thought, since I think he added this to the agenda, just a little bit of a discussion on booking award travel to Australia. Obviously, you had leveraged a lot of what Spencer had shared. But how long were you looking? Were there any particular strategies that you used to try to find award space? And how long did you spend looking? I'll say, obviously, you probably weren't just waiting for Spencer to send something. You probably had this on your radar for quite some time.
I mean, I kind of was just waiting for Spencer the whole time. I mean, it was on my radar, and I was waiting for Spencer the whole time. So basically, once I had it in my mind that we were thinking of going. At that point, every time like I would see an award alert or even a price fair alert, basically, I turned all those searches on. And so every time I saw that, I would check to see if it worked for us. Obviously, I didn't want to outlay cash unless I wasn't ready to do that until I think we finally booked those flights 2 or 3 months before the trip. But basically, it was about a year before that we thought about going. And then from that point on, I was looking out for every time someone said the word Australia or New Zealand to anything, I was always looking for that. And like typically that's how we book travel. Like either we know where we want to go and then I just keep looking, because I feel like at least 50% of the time something shows up. Maybe the something will only cover 2 or 3 of us and then we have to buy the last 2 on cash. Like I was prepared to do that, right? But, I got the alert that there was all this Qantas award space, and that's why there was 3 J seats. And actually there were 4 J seats, but I was like, I'm not sitting by myself. So I'm pretty sure there was 4, or at least, because like all the award space opened up at the same time. And I was looking at 3 days, August 9th, 10th, or 11th. And at least definitely on 2 of those days, there was like 4 J award seats. I don't know about on the 10th, the one we actually ended up booking. And so, that's what I was doing the whole time. And then I just build the trip as I go along. Like I said, I had multiple flights booked, and I only canceled when I needed the points to book a different alternative flight or whatever. That's kind of how it goes. Our next big trip, which we're still not 100% committed to, but like over our February break, we hopped on there was all this Eva Air award space opened up. And so we have like a week-long trip to Taiwan potentially planned. And that is like towards the end of the Chinese New Year period as well. So, it would be a good time to be there. It would be a bad time if it was like Chinese New Year itself. It's just, I don't need that kind of stress right now, but it's like towards the end of the 2 weeks. And so that we kind of did the opposite. It opened up and I was like, all right, this coincides with our break. I'm going to book this and then we'll cancel later if we're not going to go. But with this, we knew we were going to go. I knew I was going to pay cash if I had to. And I was just kept the hope up.
Yeah, I think for Australia and New Zealand, I mean, it's about patience and nerves of steel, right? Because you will almost never find the exact dates that you want or exactly what you want when you're going to book at any one moment, especially round trip, right? It's all about book what you can, book first, ask questions later, and keep iterating, keep improving. Because I think one of the previous episodes, Trevor, we talked about my trip that I booked to Australia, right? And how I was really happy. I did a creative rerouting and everything. By the way, I've kept none of those flights. They're all gone. Even though I was really excited about it. I was excited to be going through Vietnam and flying all these Vietnamese carriers and everything. I completely changed everything. And Trevor was even there when I was booking it because it's funny. I was like, is this any good? And I was like bouncing it off Trevor. And then suddenly I tried to book it and it gave me an error. And I was like, oh, I was dejected because, like I think I said previously, nothing is worse than finding award space and you're never really that excited about it until it's gone. And then you're like, oh, that was the best thing ever. It turned out it actually was still there. I ended up booking it and it's great. Timing works perfect for the cruise that I'm taking. I basically booked this cruise from Australia. I originally wasn't committing to going to this thing because my friends were committed and they went, but because I didn't have airfare, right? I couldn't find any airfare. I was like, there's nothing here. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. But, again, you just got to be patient, have nerves of steel. Something will probably come up, sometimes exactly what you want. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. I ended up within a day before and a day after that cruise, I got premium class from Australia and to Australia on One World carriers. I just had to wait. For that availability to show up.
And you booked that about a month in, right? Or a month out?
Yeah. It ended up being just about a month out. And it's funny. It's like the flight back to the U.S. And again, what I would also recommend, obviously, is focus on things like L.A. and San Francisco because, just trying to search from the East Coast is completely pointless at this point.
Well, it's always get the overwater segment and then filter in everything else. But the only other thing I'd offer, in addition to what you've said, is high balances do help, right? It's just like what Joe was mentioning. He had probably like 3 or 4 different bookings and just canceled as he needed to open up more miles and points. And that's the experience I've been having myself. I've got a 19-day trip now, and I'm still looking to tweak to get to something more reasonable. But I've got like 2 ways to Australia. I've got 1 way home. I think one of those is all the way from the East Coast. Most of them are from LA and stuff. But the reality is that they're adding more and more space and more flights to Australia and New Zealand. I mean, I don't know how long that Air New Zealand flight that you took, Joe, has been around. I know it existed temporarily before the pandemic, then went away for quite some time. And then now you've got a handful of other like Americans flying to New Zealand from, I don't know if they're flying from DFW. And then Australia is trying to, or not Australia, Qantas is trying to do some sunrise flights. I think they're trying to do, is it Auckland to New York and then eventually Sydney to New York? There's a lot of capacity that's probably coming on in the next year or 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think Air New Zealand, I don't know if it was like totally new, but there was a Houston to, oh wait, no, I took the Houston. Oh yeah, so I took the Houston and it was like new. I think they have a JFK to Auckland now, which I couldn't find award space on. That would have been ideal. But yeah, I think you're totally right, TK. You just kind of have to have nerves of steel, be ready to jump, especially when like there's no, I think the trickiest thing was I had booked something with Cathay Asia Miles, and this was pre-devaluation that I ended up having to like cancel. And so I did have to pay a cancellation fee on that, but everything else that I booked with AA Miles, with United Miles,
and in my experience, I've actually booked one of our I guess ways is booked with Air Canada, and we paid $85K versus I think $70K, so we could cancel because we just weren't sure whether we were going to take it. And there used to be talk of a trick to be able to get the saver if it was still available. I haven't tried that. I mean, candidly, the cancellation fees on Air Canada make it more attractive to just pay the $85K or whatever the cancelable fare is versus paying a whole lot of cash out of
I
pocket.
just had to pay that, but it's 150 Canadian. So it's like what, like $109 or something like that?
Yeah, but it adds up when you're talking about 4 seats.
Yeah, no.
And maybe
Yeah.
maybe 60,000 sounds like a lot as well. I guess it comes down to what you have more of it at any given time.
Well, I think what you're reacting to this fact that you're much more likely that the flight that you booked is probably not the one you're keeping. I think that's probably what that is a function of, right? More so than the money.
Yeah, I mean, if it was the closing, the closing flight, right? This was, hey, I found a way home on end of January, and I had no idea how I was going to get there. I just knew that MLK holiday is within 2 weeks of that, so I could leverage at least one federal holiday. Let me just get this just in case. If I was trying to close it where I had the way home or the way there, and I was just getting the way home, I'd just do the saver because then the trip would be booked effectively. Okay, Joe, any final thoughts on the trip in general?
Just one last thing. I was looking at the notes and I realized what you were asking, TK, about the window seats for the A380. It was, I did not realize that this was the indicator, but yes, premium economy window seat, by our window seat, there was a large, you would imagine seeing it in business class compartment where we could put stuff in. And so, yeah, that was actually pretty convenient. I didn't realize that was like a part of the new product. So yeah, I did really enjoy that and put a bunch of stuff in there. And it was really nice to have that extra storage space. It's not, it's like I could fit my laptop in there.
It's pretty big. You could fit a backpack in there. You could fit
a thinner backpack in there. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So like all our blankets and stuff went in there. My son was sitting by the window, so I didn't utilize it as much as I would. It was like kind of a dump everything in there. And then just get in there once or twice type thing. But yeah, that did work really well.
Yeah, those are really cool. And the interesting thing is, I think the people in the very back of the A380, because of the curvature of the plane, they don't get them. So if you're in the last few rows of premium economy, you're kind of SOL.
Haha, suckers. Yeah, I'm just amazed by the. I think I flew my first 737 Max. I'm just like they have like gigantic overhead bins. I'm just amazed by like what they're able to do with space these days.
It is interesting how engineers have figured this they have solved the problem, really. Because I think on those Maxes, like they don't even have to worry about, most of the time you don't have to worry about having them check bags, right? Because there's enough overhead space just because of the way they've engineered the bins.
Give those engineers a problem and they'll fix it.
Yeah. Speaking as an engineer myself, yeah, we get things done.
So Joe, it's just been awesome to have you on here. Obviously going after talking with you for however many hundreds of hours, I think, on the Saverosity podcast. Before we close it out, I just have to ask, can we get you back on for Festivus at the end of the year?
Why you put me under pressure?
I was saying, put him right on the spot there, huh? Wouldn't be an episode
just a little bit.
That, huh?
I thought we were talking about this. We were talking about this personally offline via text. I will tell you, Trevor. I will tell the people what I told you, Trevor. I'm just not as hip to the game as I used to be. Do not know if I would be as interesting as I once was. I'm not like for example, like what's my deal of the year? Like, I don't know, man. I'm just trying to survive here with all the kids and all their activities. I'm just, my deal of the year is
Skycouch,
not having to fill up my tank with gas more than twice a week. Yeah, that's my deal of the year. No, that was not a deal for sure. Skycouch was not a deal. I mean, it got the job done, and I'm glad we did it. And I don't mind.
Joe,
I think
you're getting us confused with another podcast. This is not that kind of podcast.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, I pay for cash for most things now, so at least in the spirit of our previous Festivuses, Trevor, I don't know how I could do it, but we'll see if I can fit it in. I'm telling you, I'm really busy. I'm glad we got the chance to talk, but
it only took us a month and a half.
I gotta thank you guys for being patient with me because it was like so hard to like find a time to record. Well, so I appreciate
it. It was worth it. I mean, I feel like I've heard hundreds of hours of Joe talking, and this is my first time actually having a conversation with him. So it was a highlight for me.
And it's just as great as always.
Oh, and you know what's funny? Thank you. That's very kind of you. It's great to talk to you guys as well. But I just realized, because when you were on our podcast, TK, I wasn't on that episode, so I heard you because I edited it. But we weren't chatting.
That's a good point.
Because when you first said that, I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like you were on our podcast, but then I realized it was just me hearing you. Like
it's like I feel like I know Joe at this point, but I've never met him, and this is the first time we've actually had a synchronous conversation.
Well,
same.
You know the funny the funny part. I think we did the podcast for what 2 years before we finally met in person.
Oh, me and you, and we only met for like 30 seconds.
It was like I don't know, like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was very short. It was very short at the top of the escalator, but in the Polynesian. I remember exactly where it was.
Well, I look forward to my 15 seconds in 2027. Okay.
Yeah. Put it in the calendar. Put it in the calendar, TK. I'll see you there.
All right. Awesome.
There we go. Okay, Joe. So tell us how folks can find you.
You can find me at AsAJoeFlies on social media as long as that still exists. And if you are looking to book a Disney trip or a cruise with cash, you can email me, Joseph Cheung at Travelmation with an M as in Mary.net.
And you are an award-winning Travelmation travel agent, aren't you?
I am. They just announced the nominees for the Agent of the Year award for 2023 and announced that I was going to be presenting it, even though no one asked me if I was going to present it. But I guess I am now. I kind of knew I was going to have to present it.
Not only are you award-winning, but now you are the MC, or at least the presenter of new awards.
I just opened the card and I read the name, so
I feel so honored.
I gotta get ready. I gotta get ready to make sure I know how to pronounce everyone's name.
And you got to break out the tuxedo or whatever folks wear for such things.
Okay, this is my suit for the next 10 years. My wife says I better fit into it, so.
Well, that's the show. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed listening.
If you've enjoyed this episode, consider becoming a Milenomics Patreon member and get access to even more in-depth miles, points, and travel content.
Until then, we hope your next story is a travel story.